ratios relating the radius of the outer gear, the radius of the inner gear, and the distance of the tracing point from the center of the inner gear, you are now ready to actually work through the process of creating the digital files and editing them for your gears that will eventually be laser cut. This will guide you through that process. First, go to the gear generator website, and when you pull it up, this is the default setting that appears. You'll notice this is not exactly the type of gear situation we would like to create. We do see the option here for an internal spur gear. It says N less than 0. So for gear 1, what we're going to do here for gear 1 is it says N1 less than 0 internal gear. So we're going to choose a negative setting. And let's say I just do... you should use whatever appropriate ratio that you have. I'm just putting in some numbers here. Leave the rest of the settings alone. We don't need to mess with them. If you'd want, you can put in some crosshairs. They'll ultimately be deleted later, but they might be useful for just orienting some things in the image later on. All right, once you've entered your values, you do have to click Update in order for the gear to update. And it'll show you an image of what your gear is going to look like. So imagine taking this and cutting it out, somewhere between like a 6-inch or 10-inch diameter. If this is about actual size, think about how these teeth are going to rotate and move. You don't want to have super huge clunky teeth. You don't want to have super fine teeth either. If I did this, same ratio, right? But when I actually go to look at this thing, this is not going to work out very well. Remember, we're going to be cutting this on a laser cutter. It is going to be shining a very high intensity beam of light at something flammable, wood, cardboard, and whatever it is, right? We're going to be using wood. But we could, burn up our material when we're making cuts that are this fine and this small, this close together. The pieces that we're going to be left with won't be particularly strong. We might end up breaking a lot of teeth when we're using it. So we want something between chunky and super, super small. So maybe if I go with this ratio, let's see, seems reasonable. Okay, once you're satisfied with the appearance of your gear, you'll go ahead and click the download SVG file right underneath the gear images here. Don't pick the DXF, pick the SVG. We're going to download that file. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and just two-finger click here, show in Finder. And yeah, I'll save it as a different name in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and two-finger click again and click Open with Microsoft Word. So the file is not quite ready the way it comes. Illustrator can't quite read the file, so we do have to make one small edit. You'll get a window like this. Don't worry about this. Just click OK. You don't have to read any of it. Just click OK. It'll be fine. You're going to get a bunch of scary looking code. Don't worry about this. Don't freak out. We're not going to actually do much with this. On this first line right here, you're just going to change version 1.1 to say version 1.0. That is all we are going to do. Everything else is going to stay exactly the same. Go to File, Save As. And call it whatever you'd like, but do keep that SVG ending. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. I'll just call it Video Gear. You call it whatever you'd like. Leave the SVG. I'm going to click Save. And it's going to ask you if you want to use just the .txt ending or both. We're going to click Use Both. We want to keep the SVG file type. So we're going to click both. All right. And then click OK again when you see another scary looking message. And that's it. I promise there's going to be no more code or anything scary looking like that. When you go back to Finder, you'll see that here's Video Gear in my Downloads folder. It now has the SVG and TXT file types. We need to get rid of that TXT. So I'm just going to go click on this. And when I go to like rename it, 2 clicks, not a double click, but just kind of 2 slow clicks to rename it, the TXT just kind of disappears and I'll just click off onto something else. And it's going to ask me, do I want to keep the TXT extension or do I want to just use the SVG? And that's what we're going to pick the second one. We're going to just use SVG. So now I have video gear .svg file right here. Okay. You should go ahead and open up Illustrator. I've got Adobe Illustrator already open. If you have not used Illustrator before, do make sure to get it from self-service and very carefully read the documentation that comes along with it. The login is a little unusual in the way that you get into this program the first time. Once you're in Illustrator, we'll go to File, Open, and find your file from the Downloads folder. We've got our gears in Illustrator. Mine looks a little small to begin with. And so one of the things I'm going to check is I'm going to check how large this white square is. This is called my artboard. I want to see how large this artboard is. So I'm on artboard here. And I'm going to click this button right here that says Edit Artboards. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And here the W and H, that's the width and height of my artboard. You can see right now it's set to 3.25. So that whole white box is only, 3¼ inches across. Not very large. I'll go ahead and change it to be 10 wide and 10 tall. Okay. Getting used to how you select things in Illustrator can be a little awkward if you're not used to it. There are actually 2 different selection tools. There's this hollowed out, empty looking cursor called the selection tool, and this solid one called the direct selection tool. We will use both. It is important which one you pick at which time. So right now we're going to go ahead and just click the selection tool. I'm going to click and drag a box around and just make sure I've covered my entire gear. Everything's going to be highlighted. I'm going to hold the Shift key, grab this top corner, and go ahead and stretch this out until it's about the size that I'd like. You don't have to fill a full 10 by 10. Okay, whatever size you think is going to be appropriate to make your scaled up drawing of the double Ferris wheel problem. Okay, so there's that. You'll notice one of the things we want to do is get rid of some of these extra lines that we have going on over here. To do that, we're going to use the direct selection tool. This is the solid white cursor. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to click a path and delete that. We're going to leave the middle circles for now. Notice that the outer circle, I did delete part of it, but not the whole thing. The path is broken up into multiple parts. So you will need to just go through, nope, not that. You will need to go through and select carefully to make sure that you get rid of that full path. Okay. The only one that we really need right now for any reason is the middle line on the small gear. But I'll leave the middle line on the larger gear for just a moment to kind of show you when we think about the gears rolling around each other, it is those blue lines, that middle blue line that's going to be rolling, adjacent, right, touching the inner gear and the outer gear. So those are the 2 lines that we're interested in. Those are called the pitch lines. Okay. This is almost all ready to go. There's a couple things that need to be addressed though. One, there's no hole for our pencil here. We need to figure out where we are going to put our hole for the pencil. To do that, you're going to use the line segment tool. So I'll go ahead and click this. And even if you did not choose to put the crosshairs in, you can snap right to the middle of this circle. It'll show up and it'll say that pink word intersect there. And the first thing we need to do is figure out in this particular scale that we have, how large is the pitch radius. So we're going to click and drag from the center of our circle. Oh, there. I don't know. I'm assuming the intersect is, yeah, there's the center. All right, so we're going to click and drag that. I did let go. Obviously, you see the line, but while I'm still in the line tool, I haven't done anything else. I can click and drag the end of that line and move it elsewhere. Notice that there's this little gray box that appears that says D and then some numbers with degrees. Well, that is the distance, the length of the line, and just the angle I'm pointing at. It's a circle. It doesn't matter where you go, so just grab a point on the circle. And we see that the distance right now is 1.72 inches. Okay. You should have a ratio for your inner gear radius, which we're going to use this pitch radius here, and the distance for where your pencil hole needs to be. So assuming, once you know this distance for your pitch radius, you can go ahead and determine where exactly your pencil hole needs to be located. So what I would not do is try to just dial it in. I could look at this and dial it in and let go here. I'm not going to do that. I'll go ahead and just delete that line. While still on the line tool here, I'll click the center. And then you get an option. I'm just going to click and release. And you see I get line segment tool options. You can put in manually, type in the numbers for the length that you would like. Let's say mine should be at, I don't know, 0.842 is what I determined. The angle doesn't particularly matter, but if you've got a angle you're fond of, you can go ahead and use that. All right, and we'll click OK. And there is a line showing me right where the center of my pencil hole should be. The next thing we're going to need is the ellipse tool. And I have it showing now. If yours is not showing, you might see a rectangle tool right here. And if you do, what you're going to do is just press and hold a click, and you'll see some options for different things you can turn that rectangle tool into. And we'll choose the ellipse tool. Once you have the ellipse tool, you can just draw a circle anywhere. If you just start drawing, you're going to get an ellipse. But if you hold the shift key while you're doing it, it will force it to be a circle. Okay. You're going to need to choose an appropriate diameter for your pencil hole. If you make a pencil hole that is too large, let's kind of scale out and imagine what this is. Your pencil is going to be sliding around inside that hole, and you're not going to have a very precise circles or a path when you go to draw. At the same time, if it's too small, you might not actually be able to fit your pencil tip in there. So you need to do a little bit of thinking and just, scale it appropriately based on the size of your overall image and what you think you've got going on. I think I got a little off circular here. There we go. All right. When you've done that, I'm going to grab the direct selection tool just for a moment to click this, make sure I've got it, and then the selection tool. Make sure you don't click anything else. If you do, you will be moving lots of other things around. So we're just going to go ahead and click right in the center there and drag this thing and move it right to the end of our line. Notice that it will kind of snap to the line. It's very nice. It snaps to the line, and then you can put it right at the end. And you see it pop up intersect right there. That's the end of the line. We'll go ahead and put that there. Once you've done that, I'll just grab the direct selection tool, the solid white cursor, click my line that we drew in, and delete that. We don't really want the laser cutter cutting that. And now we can go ahead and take out a lot of these, any of these extra superfluous things. These crosshairs can go. I don't even need this central circle. I don't need a hole in the middle of my gear for any reason. We're going to get rid of the remaining pitch lines. We don't need these anymore. And just make sure we've got this all cleaned up and ready to go. Looks good. One last thing we're going to do before we save this and get ready to cut. In this section over here, where these gears come together, that's potentially going to be a little messy on the laser cutter. I don't think this file was necessarily designed with laser cutting in mind. We'll use the selection tool. Select the main project here and go to Edit, Object, Ungroup. Ungroup everything here. Use the direct selection tool now, the solid cursor. Click and drag, get the inner gear, make sure your pencil hole circle is included, but not anything on the outer gear. And you can press Command G to group, or you can go to Object, Group. And then just switch over to the selection tool. Don't click anything else. We don't have the outer gear selected, and now I'm just going to press the left arrow key. I'm going to slide that whole gear out towards the middle of the project and away from the outer gear. It doesn't have to be exactly in the center. We're just going to be cutting out, and this will be scrap from the center anyways. One last thing to consider is that the material we are using is not going to be extraordinarily thick. It is wood. It's a little bit flexible. If your outer gear is looking a little thin, as I'd say this one is, we're going to want to perhaps stiffen it up a little bit by making this outer ring a little bit thicker. So we're going to leave the teeth exactly where they are. Direct selection tool, pick the circle, go back to the selection tool. It's going to make a nice little box around it. And from there, you can just press, you can click and drag the corners. Notice that they're going to be all wonky and out of proportion unless you hold the Shift key. That's going to keep it nice and circular for you. So I'll go ahead and stretch that corner out a little bit. Shift key again, stretch this corner out a little bit. And there you have it. There is our gear, and we are ready to cut. When you're finished, just go ahead and save your file. If you want to rename it for some reason, you can go ahead and do that. You will need to save it to your computer, so you'll have the file to be able to send to the laser cutter. You can edit it, call it whatever you'd like, and save it in a convenient place for you. Leave it as this SVG file format.